We're going to be watching paint dry all day.
This may take a considerable amount of practice.
We prefer brushing the corners before we roll.
Are you ready?
Today, we are installing new flooring in the bathroom that we have been working on. Due to the condition of the existing peel and stick flooring, it will be necessary for us to remove it before installing the snap and click vinyl laminate planks. Due to the floating nature of the laminate flooring, trimming the bottom of door jambs, door casings, and other permanent features, will allow the planks to slip under, giving the final product a cleaner look.
Get a piece of the vinyl laminate to get a height on it, start marking our door casing areas and mark our tile where the shower is. That way we can start notching everything so the flooring will actually go underneath it and hold it in place. And that's going to give us our mark. That's going to be high enough to where the flooring can get underneath it without being too high. And then I have this blade. It's a masonry blade, and we're just going to use that to cut along the edge here. The room is only 49 inches wide, and the planks are 49.5 inches wide, which means most people would think, okay, well, we'll just go ahead and trim the planks on one side and then call it a day and put full planks in throughout the course of everything. We can't do that because the floor itself gains some of its strength from the staggered pattern. So you still want to have that staggered pattern. And it looks like we're ready to cut the first one.
Laying out the planks before installing will help to decide how the first row needs to install. If the last row is as wide or wider than a plank, start the first row cut lengthwise, to allow for the last row to install at a reasonable width.
While adding your rows for the vinyl laminate, you want at least 12 inches of a stagger in them, because you want the staggers to be able to be even from one end to the other. If you had a 5.5 foot room, you wouldn't want to go 12 inches because then you would have 6 inches at one end where you're going to either have too much or too little. You're going to want to do something a little bit different in that. So for like a 5.5 foot, you'd want to go 13 inches or 14 inches. In this case, we are going 14.25 inches, and that will give us an even stagger from one end to the other. So at one point, you'll have the 14.25 on this end, and then when it finally staggers to the other end, you'll still have a 14.25 piece at the end instead of a 1 inch piece or 3.5 inch piece or a 2 inch piece. You're basically cutting the plank in half and then reversing how it goes in because you don't want those seams to be too close or it becomes a hinge point anyway. We're cutting this piece and basically cutting it in two, and what we're going to do is when we install it, we're going to put this piece on this end and this piece on this. If you're doing a room similar to the size that we're dealing with today, you can cut all of your pieces out all at once, at least the first 4 rows, and then you can take them inside and start installing them. This would save you a little time going back and forth to the saw, and if you know for certain that those are going to be the measurements, then it's going to be an easy layout that way for you.
When marking cuts for circles, such as toilet flanges, a 1-gallon paint container can be used if a compass or similar marking tools are not available to you. Adjustments to the size of the cut can then be made depending on the size of the flange.
If you're wondering what kind of tool to use in this situation, don't worry. They're all going to be shitty cuts.
Now this is where it gets tricky for those that don't do this very often. You want to get your measurement there, and that's by coming in through here, just getting the edge of that. Put it as far over as you need to. If it's going up against the wall, then that's where you want it to be. Then, on this side, mimic, put it as close as possible to where that needs to be there. And then mark one there, and then mark one on the other side. Same with this side. Now, you're going to take a square and make those marks. Then you're going to cut them there accordingly.
In difficult locations such as doors, it may be necessary to adjust the offset pattern of the planks by using a more manageable sized piece or placing a seam in the doorway. During the initial step of laying out the planks, try to consider the joints and seams that may need to be present for easier installation around these locations. However, there may still be some locations along the wall that may still pose issues.
In some cases, the laminate flooring won't come with an underlayment, the one that we're going to be installing, does. Because the vinyl laminate flooring has an underlayment built in, you won't necessarily have to put the underlayment on the bare floor. However, if you choose to have that extra protection, you can have that layer of underlayment.
Difficult locations, such as thin strips along the wall, may require shims to hold them in place while setting the next piece. A small pry bar will also be beneficial in creating opposing force for the edges to connect properly.
The last row isn't without things worth mentioning, because of course the first piece that needs to go in also needs to tuck underneath the door jamb. This can be done by using the block and tapping it on the edge of the piece that you're putting in. You can usually use a scrap piece that will mate up with that edge and then tap the scrap piece instead, so that way your piece goes unscathed. Then you can put your next piece in, and once both pieces are in well, you can actually tap on the wall side of the first piece and equal it out between the two walls. As long as you're using the tools in such a way that they're not going to damage anything while you're trying to install, I'd say try to get as creative as you can to be able to work with some areas that just are not going to cooperate at all. Hey, Bubba, wake up. Wake up. We're done. Did I miss the baseboards?
We are reserving that for another Captain Shorts.